As much as it is not yet 1 o'clock, we'll make a start, and I'll keep in mind that you started 1 or 2 minutes earlier. Hereby, I open this academic ceremony in which Steffi Kohl will defend the academic thesis, Making the Invisible Visible, Improving Collaborative Problem Solving through Social Computing. May I invite you to present a summary of your study and the conclusions of your thesis. The floor is yours.
Dear Prorector, dear committee, dear colleagues, friends and family, I would like to start my defense with a brief summary of my thesis titled Making the Invisible Visible, Improving Collaborative Problem Solving through Social Computing. During our daily work, many of us find ourselves spending a substantial portion, if not the majority of work time in meetings. However, 71% of managers consider their meetings unproductive due to low meeting quality and low meeting engagement. However, this is a big issue as effective team communication plays a pivotal role in achieving high team performance and has been shown to improve trust, decision-making quality, and problem-solving ability. Investigating how to improve team communication is hence critical. In the past, we have mostly studied team communication by observing meetings or using audio and video recordings. However, this method only gives us small amounts of data and is a lot of work for researchers who can only be in one meeting at a time. Further, these means of studying team communication allow only for limited access to social signals, such as turn-taking behavior. These social signals are important to fully understand team communication, but they are often invisible to researchers. As such, my research started with one very big question. How can we make social signals of team communication visible? In order to explore this question, I went on an interdisciplinary journey to study the domains that investigate team communication. I primarily focused on the domains of psychology, social network analysis, social signal processing, and computer-supported collaborative work. Interestingly, computer scientists have been the primary contributors to the literature on means to improve team communication, with a notable lack of integration of insights gained by the other domains. However, many of these studies would benefit from integrating insights from other disciplines engaged in team research. An example of this lack of interdisciplinarity is the failure to incorporate team cognition into the analysis of team communication from different activities such as need finding, ideation, and prototyping. Team cognition is the way a group of people works together. It's how they think, how they make decisions, how they solve problems as a team. Notably, the relationship between team communication and team cognition is bidirectional, which means that they influence each other. Team communication helps to shape and influence team cognition by providing the means for team members to share information. On the other hand, team cognition influences team communication by shaping how a team makes decisions, how they process information, and how they solve problems. As such, different cognitive activities should not be treated the same way when analyzing team communication. This can be easily understood when looking at common patterns of design thinking teams. Teams working with design thinking usually go through 3 stages: need finding, ideation, and prototyping. While need finding contains 2 cognitive activities, namely divergent and convergent thinking, ideation only contains 1 cognitive activity, divergent thinking, and prototyping only contains 1 cognitive activity, convergent thinking. When we have a team working on an ideation task, we expect them to be cognitively busy with generating a lot of new ideas, and this affects in turn the way they talk to each other. To bridge the gap between the fields, my research aims to answer 2 key questions today. Question 1, can we harness social signals within team communication to effectively detect team activity? And question 2, can we leverage this understanding to strategically influence these signals in order to enhance overall team performance? I used an interdisciplinary approach to answer these questions, as depicted in the visualization above. Each chapter finds its place within the intersection of these domains, offering a multifaceted perspective on the issue. While all chapters are firmly rooted in all 4 domains, The emphasis varies per chapter. For instance, chapter 2 draws mostly from the literature on social network analysis and social signal processing. Chapter 4 expands these results by integrating insights from psychology to explain the observed patterns. The first question will be mostly addressed in my first two projects, chapter 2 and 3. Chapter 2 sets out to provide a sort of proof of concept, demonstrating that there is indeed an observable difference between social signals in different activities. In chapter 3, I explore the possibility of not only observing differences between activities, but utilizing these signals to determine which activity a person is in. This allows me to detect the specific context in which a team is operating in. This capacity is crucial for providing relevant interventions to teams based on their ongoing activities. In chapter 4, I lay the foundation for addressing my second question. It explores how the signals we observe relate to team performance during various cognitive activities. In chapter 5, my thesis concludes with an exploratory study. Here, I aim to determine if we could influence the social signals in which a team is engaged while a team is engaged in an ideation task to enhance their overall performance. This study puts into practice the insights I've gathered throughout the other research studies. In the following, I would like to provide a brief overview of the key takeaways of each study. For this proof of concept study, I deployed wearable tech devices called sociometric signals, similar to what's seen in the illustration above. Teams wore these devices throughout their entire workday and filled in a questionnaire at the end of the day. I combined the collected questionnaire data with the processed social signals and prepared the data for machine learning task. The resulting dataset was used in chapter 2, 3, and 4. Following a single class analysis, we were able to show that these three activities indeed have very distinct social patterns. The graph above shows the feature weight for each feature per activity. The features that were included in this analysis are rotating leadership, rotating contribution, turn-taking, successful interruption, and unsuccessful interruption. The feature weights show how and how strongly, in which direction, a feature is associated with an activity. As can be seen here, prototyping is not associated with high occurrences in any feature, making it the least interactive activity of them all. Further, we can also observe how signals perform between different activities. If we look, for example, at turn-taking, we can see that turn-taking is positively associated with need finding, less positively associated with ideation, and negatively associated with prototyping. We can conclude from this that days with high occurrences of need finding are most likely need finding days. In the previous study, we only made a binary decision. It's either need finding or it's not. However, in real-life situations, teams can change modes, and a system needs to be able to detect in which context a team is working in. It needs to be able to answer the question, is this need finding or ideation or prototyping? So while single class is like a yes-no decision, multi-class is like choosing from multiple options. In our analysis, we were able to demonstrate that this is indeed possible. All models performed above baseline, with the best performing subclass analysis performing at 94%, which is 30% above the baseline. Following the analysis performed in these two studies, we can answer the first question with yes. We can indeed harness social signals within team communication to effectively detect team activity. To start answering question 2, we conducted an analysis on the interaction between team communication, activity, and performance. While not all features showed significant results, we observed some significant differences between the features and the activities. As illustrated here, the amount of rotating leadership is associated with a higher performance impact for need-finding days. Thereby, we show that there's a relationship between team communication and team performance that indeed differs across team activities. Last, the knowledge gained previously was implemented into a custom-built video conferencing tool. The tool is shown above with the visualization in the center. Teams were asked to perform ideation tasks using the visualization for some of those tasks. The goal was to highlight the speaking contribution of each participant and incentivize participants to have more equal speaking contribution. We observed significant positive results on overall performance for teams when they used the visualization. From the analysis performed in these last two studies, we can also answer our second question with yes. We can strategically influence social signals in order to enhance overall team performance. The title of my thesis, Making the Invisible Visible, encapsulates the essence of my research journey. But how did I make the invisible, often intangible aspects of team communication visible? Together with my co-authors, I accomplished it through a blend of technology, data analysis, and interdisciplinary insights. By using advanced sociometric computing tools, such as sociometric badges and innovative software, I captured high-resolution data on team communication. Leveraging insights from diverse disciplines provided me with the knowledge to interpret the results, transforming it into meaningful insights. In doing so, I unveiled the intrinsic social dynamics that occur within team communication, even when these dynamics remained hidden to the naked eye. The invisible became visible through quantifiable patterns. My research demonstrates how technology, data, and interdisciplinary collaboration can illuminate the subtleties of team communication, empower practitioners, and provide new frontiers for social computing. Together, we have made the invisible visible. Thank you for your attention, and I give the word back to the pro-rector.
Thank you for your presentation. We will have an opposition as little people, not too many people which you see here. There will be four, as you can see on the screen, four opponents who will oppose your dissertation online. The floor goes to Professor Dr. Dominique Maer, who will open the opposition. He was the chair of the assessment committee, and he's a professor of digital innovation and marketing at this university. The floor goes to Dr. Maer.
Thank you. Dear Steffi, dear candidate, congratulations to you and the entire supervisory team to be here. I think it's a very interdisciplinary research that you showed us and that you dived into. And I think it's even more than just what you mentioned before. It's actually also on creativity, it's on design, it's on innovation management. And you had also a difficult time, I think. There was a pandemic, which particularly I can imagine some of the designs that you used had to be quite altered in order to adapt to it. So congratulations for standing now here and defending your piece. I do have a question also. And the question is particular on the multidisciplinary, almost transdisciplinary nature. And contributing or research is a give and take. So you take from certain disciplines, but you also give back. And I would like to particularly ask you, what is your contribution to design thinking? And I put that into two parts. The first one is on generalizability of your findings. You show that the data differs, so across the different stages, 3 stages. I'm still not entirely sure if we really know why it differs. So linking also onto, yes, we see that there's significant difference, yes. What does it link to the service design processes underlying? And particularly also consider that these archetypes of 3 steps are there, but they're extremely heterogeneous. I've never seen any service design or design thinking project that is like the other. So that's extremely different. The team sizes, the rotating leadership, etc., all those differs. So how generalizable are the findings? And the second one is on the managerial insights. What is a value for us to have such a coach that you propose that can now detect in which stage you are? Because if this is the outcome of the study, particular study 2, but also chapter 2, but also chapter 3, such a coach, what is the added benefit for managers that they now can detect in which stage you are? Looking forward to your answer to my questions.
Highly esteemed opponent, thank you very much for your kind words. I think anybody reading my thesis might have noticed that I shift from offline groups to online groups at some point. That was precisely the moment we were no longer allowed to do research on groups sitting in close proximity to each other without wearing masks. However, I was fortunate enough to find support by the data visualization team at Hochschule Sold to help me develop the second part of the thesis and custom build the research tool that I was able to use for chapter 5. I'm very grateful this all worked out, and I think it actually really added to the research in the end of the day, and I had a great time. But how does this relate, my research, as you ask, in terms of generalizability, and what does it mean to the design process of design thinking teams? I think that indeed it is not always the same processes in teams, but I do believe that there is a good use, and that is twofolded. On the one hand, and that is something that I hope to accomplish maybe in the near future, is the development of sort of an educational tool. What we have done with Recon in the last study, the speaking visualization, the teams that worked with them, they all said that they thought it was really insightful to the students that participated, that they should communicate like this and that they had better results. And they also saw how their team dynamics changed from a team working with the visualization to when they didn't work with the visualization. I think that students, but also practitioners, can really benefit from utilizing this tool to understand their own unconscious speaking behavior. Do you have a group dynamic where someone always dominates your ideation sessions? And that is something that can really be a learning benefit that you can then take forward with you into the next session, even when you do not use the tool. I think there's a really great benefit for this, and that might actually also go beyond just design thinking teams. Further, I also do think that a lot of design thinking teams have this very specialized meetings where they have needs, that they need automated support tools, and that can be the visualization, but it can also be, if you look at context detection, of pulling up a different setting on the whiteboard on the computer, providing different hints, giving them different tools or recommendations, for example, also for breaks. If the system detects that you are in an ideation session, but you are losing the dynamic, that it suggests to everybody take a 5-minute break. I have not tested these, unfortunately, but I do believe there is a need for it when I look at the literature, because a lot of literature tries to develop these tools, but they are unable to provide relevant interventions. So every time this gets tested, a new tool that has been developed, the teams always have in the complaints that they didn't feel like the recommendations they got were relevant to the activity they were doing at the time. So for this, I think there is a really big need for the context detection. For your second question, and I might have addressed this a bit already, was what is the value of coaches and managers for this tool? As I said, I think this can be a learning tool, but I think there's also generally a big lack of awareness that generalized advice is not helpful to teams in design thinking teams, but also to teams working on other activities. When you look at the current HR literature, there is a lot of talk about what should you do in any activity, what should you always do when you're problem solving. And these general recommendations don't seem to work. And I think the reason is because we speak differently when we have different activities. We have different needs of what needs to be communicated. A team trying to ideate needs to hear from everybody. A team prototyping is trying to close the problem space. They already had all of this input. I think we would be better in giving teams recommendations that are more specific to the cognitive activities they do.
Thank you very much for your answer.
Thank you. The opposition will be continued by Professor Dr. Alexander Grigoriev, who was also a member of the assessment committee and who is a professor of data analytics and digitalization at this university. The floor goes to Professor Grigoriev.
Thank you. Dear candidate, dear Steffi, first of all, let me also join Dominic and congratulate you with this really nice thesis. I read this book with pleasure, and the further I was reading it, actually the more questions I had. And this is not bad, this is actually good. So nowadays, good, right questions probably are even more valued than the good, right answers. So you triggered a lot my thinking, my curiosity. Thank you for that. And now it comes my question. It's actually quite simple to state. In your research, you mostly addressed and you mostly measure the team performance based on the grand coalition, what is called, for instance, in game theory, on performance of the entire group, of the entire team. But for me, it's not uncommon that the sub-teams, even for a little team like 4 people, if you form the sub-teams of 2, of 1, of 3, no matter, you can actually gain the efficiency, you can gain in the performance if you split the tasks, if the tasks are dedicated, if the tasks are divided in the clever way. And actually, my question, as I said, it's quite simple. Can your tools, for instance, the sociometric badges and solutions, can the approaches and the features that you take, like, for instance, rotating leadership, rotating contributions, turn taking, etc., help us understanding how to better form the task-specific sub-teams, that not everything is actually addressed by the entire team, but by some sub-coalitions, just in order to boost the performance, in order to better solve a problem. And if it is possible, then do you expect any specifics, any differences, for instance, when a team or a sub-team is doing the need finding, ideation, or prototyping? Thank you very much. Looking forward for your question, or for your answer, sorry.
Highly esteemed opponent, thank you very much for your kind words. I'm happy I was able to generate some ideas and questions in your mind reading this research on creativity. I'm not entirely sure if I can necessarily answer your question based on the research that I have conducted, as I did not work with subteams. However, I would like to comment on the general idea behind forming subteams. The design thinking teams that I had the pleasure of working with for my research were all real teams working on real problems, and they often formed these sub-teams in order to get everyone to generate ideas. And one of the reasons we developed VCon, the visualization software, in the end the way it is because what I learned from my studies and from working with these teams, but also, of course, from the psychology literature, is that in order to have everybody participate, you do not need to tell the person that's under participating to say more. You need to tell the person that speaks too much in the room to shut up. Pardon my English here. And that's basically what we did. The feedback I got from the study was that the over-participator kept saying, I felt uncomfortable to say more, so I stopped speaking. And as much as that might be uncomfortable in a team, it really worked. The teams that performed by far the worst in my pilot studies, my research studies, and across the boards were the team where one person kept talking over the others. Often we generate sub-teams to try to balance this out in ideation tasks specifically, but also in need-finding tasks. I have seen this done. I hope that by using this software or this training, you do not have a need for these sub-teams anymore. I hope that we can achieve high efficiency through educating people that speaking more is not speaking better, specifically when it comes to creative tasks. We don't know everything, and often it's the niche ideas of the person that might not say a lot that will help. Creating software that can assist people to give this breathing space for people to stop, think, and come up with ideas, I hope will make sub-teams unnecessary. Somewhat answers your question.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. The opposition will be continued by Dr. Sean Renthal, who was also a member of the assessment committee and who is a senior principal researcher at Microsoft Research. The floor goes to Dr. Renthal.
Thank you. Dear candidate, dear Steffi, well done. I really like your strong stance on equality in video calls and telling the person who's speaking the most to quiet down. I think in general, it's a good stance. And I quite liked your visualization. I thought it was crisp and easy to follow, even though, as you said, it may have been somewhat distracting in some cases. On reflection, listening to your talk today and listening to the previous 2 questions, my question is, turn-taking amount is a good way to start, but it's a bit of a brute measure in terms of what's going on in meetings. Fair enough in terms of this design ideation, you're looking for lots of different ideas and you're looking for the niche one that comes out. And if someone's talking all the time, okay, it's too much. Okay, but what next? So what other things are important in terms of understanding what's going on in meetings? So for example, it may be that the amount of turn-taking route is sort of bad, but maybe the person who says one thing could be also saying something that is very important. It could also be that it's more about the give and take between people. Even if one person talks a lot, the questions posed by somebody, which are answered much longer by somebody else, could be really important. So beyond just amount of turn taking and trying to maybe reduce the over talkers, what could we do to do better in future versions of your kind of tool?
Your kind question, and of course I think this question also very much relates to your own system that you proposed, which is not, my system is real-time. You mostly work with near real-time feedback for teams, and I think in near real-time feedback you have the ability to influence or present a lot more information. People are very shortly detached from the situation and they have more cognitive space. The reason we focused on turn-taking and this very simplistic visualization with a bit of a brute approach was because people get very easily cognitively overloaded in the moment. We had some visualizations that we tested in a study that's not included in this PhD that used different visualizations, and we could see that people were extremely distracted by the visualization. You also need to be careful to choose the correct channel through which you provide information. I chose a visual channel because you need to have a complementary channel to the channel that you are in an activity with. In this case, it's speaking and listening, so you cannot do it speaking or listening as a feedback channel. You have to use an alternative channel, which is visual in this case. I do think that there are other possibilities. They do require a lot more research, I would say, but I do think that we could try to use other features in order to try to give feedback, specifically for offline situations. I was really hoping to do more research, but unfortunately my time on offline meetings was cut a bit short. I work with sociometric badges. There's a new device for the Rhythm badge now. You could implement haptic feedback into these badges because as they're clipped to you as a person to give feedback to the speaker in the room directly, for example, also on rotating leadership, which is a proxemic feature, right? You could give teams feedback that they have been together for a certain amount of time or that they have been apart for too long in a meeting. I think there are really interesting studies on proxemic features, so the closeness to each other in teams. And that is something I could see real-time feedback also being very beneficial. I think real-time feedback has the chance of really making these slow, small habit changes, right? If you get a feedback every time you do an activity, over time you will adopt and learn this behavior. Where near real-time feedback, I think, is more on the big picture sort of information that you can provide. How was the entire meeting in general? How have I changed over the course of an hour-long meeting? I think there's not so much potential in this for real-time feedback. I think this is where the near real-time devices and approaches have to keep working. But yeah, to answer your question, I do think that the future would be in going again towards offline meetings and try to continue some more work there. I think there's a lot more social signals and nonverbal communication that we can research compared to the online meetings, which of course remove some channels completely, such as proximity, but also make a lot of the nonverbal communication markers very difficult to observe through noise.
Thank you.
We continued by Professor Dr. Ad de Jong, who is a professor of marketing at the Copenhagen Business School. The floor goes to Professor de Jong.
Thank you. Dear doctoral candidate, my compliments for this interesting dissertation, and especially for taking such a creative, unconventional, fundamental perspective on microprocesses within the teams. Also quite unconventional and novel when it comes to research methods like these sociometric badges. Really interesting. And my question is also about methods and relates to chapter 4 of your dissertation. In this study, you focus on collaborative, creative problem solving by new product development teams and examine the value of using multi-model signals when modeling high-level collaborative patterns to understand the performance of these MPD teams. To analyze the data, you make use of multi-level modeling. And multi-level modeling is often used when analyzing data like individuals nested within teams. So there are two levels, the individual and the team level. Moreover, multi-level analysis corrects for clustering of individual data within the teams, and then you get reliable results. However, in your case, the levels seem to be different. It's not individuals nested within teams. Rather, it's, the individual level is not so relevant. Instead, the focus is a bit more on time and team levels. Where several variables are measured on a weekly basis, while others are measured on a daily basis when it comes to time. And then there's team performance at the team level. My question to you, could you clarify a bit better the hierarchical structure of your model? Specifically, what is the lower and what is the higher level? And which variables reside at the lower level and which ones at the higher level? And a related question is the level of analysis of the dependent variable, team performance. Usually, when applying multi-level analysis, the dependent variable is at the lower level of analysis, and independent variables could be at higher and lower levels of the analysis. But in your case, it seems that team performance, the dependent variable, is at the higher level of aggregation. It's measured on a weekly basis, compared to the independent variables, rotating leadership, rotation contribution, turn taking, because they are measured on a daily basis, which is a bit uncommon. So could you justify why the model is as it is?
Dear highly esteemed opponent, thank you very much for your question. I will try my very best to answer this question. It is slightly specific. I have to admit I had to get an expert consultancy on this exact question because I was also fairly confused looking at my data set. Just to recap, as you pointed out, I have measures on the individual and the team level, as well as the day and the week level. Performance, the dependent variable, is measured on the week, on the team. The social signals are measured on the day, on the individual. As such, the higher level, if I can explain this correctly, is the team and the performance level per week. I chose this model due to the structure of the data sets. I have seen this similarly done in studies observing performance of students over semesters, which of course doesn't explain everything, but it's similarly performed in analysis in high school education in students. So you look specifically at how students performed over the course of a semester in a class, so you have the same grouping as a team, and then they measure daily activity of the students, so speaking, contribution, sort of a participation grade, so to speak. I guess you could do the same at a university level. And then you get the same structure of the analysis. Does this answer your question or not so much?
Sort of. Yeah, maybe you could consider simplifying the model a bit by just focusing on weeks and days. Now there's 3 levels. That might make things also quite complicated.
So we did have quite a discussion whether or not we are able to move the social signals from a day to a week basis, right? Okay. To have the time element out of the analysis, which would simplify it. However, the data is extremely aggregated as is. Okay. The signals are measured per, I think, 3 milliseconds in the original data set. I have aggregated this to a set of 15 minutes to have then one variable, and then I calculate rotating leadership and rotating contribution as explained in chapter 3, I think, with the math equations, over the day. So I already went from milliseconds to 15 minutes blocks to days, and then aggregating the entire set even further to weeks really just reduced the data set to a point where it wasn't useful anymore. Unfortunately, as this was evaluated by their team leaders and done in a real company, they did not want to provide me with daily evaluations of their teams. I tried, but this is sadly not what they usually do. They don't have an evaluation of their performance on every day, and they didn't want to do it as it might affect the team dynamics. So unfortunately, I was left with this data set, and this was the approach that we concluded would be the most statistically sound one, while not losing too much detail in the data.
Thank you very much. Well, milliseconds, that sounds very quick.
It's very big data sets. I think I had 30 gigabytes of Excel spreadsheets in the beginning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The opposition will be continued by Professor Dr. Lisa Bruggen, who is a professor in financial services and finance at this university. The floor goes to Professor Bruggen.
Yes, dear Steffi, I'm sorry that I had to join online last minute, but as you can tell by my voice, I'm unfortunately a little bit ill, but at least I can join you on this festive occasion. And even on the screen, I love how your hair color matched your slide and you bring color to this festive occasion. My question nicely connects to the previous one, because it's also about multi-level models, or rather the lack of multi-level models, because you use the same data sets for several studies or several chapters in your dissertation. And when I started reading in the first 2 chapters, I directly noticed, like, okay, she's treating these 222 respondents as independent observations, but of course they're nested in the teams, as you also quite nicely just explained in your response to the previous study. So I'd ask you details about how you then specify the multi-level model, but my question is more fundamental, because you did not specify a multi-level model for the other 2 chapters, but rather treated them as independent observation. And I think that's an issue, because they're not. And that brings me to my question: how valid do you think the conclusions are of those chapters if you don't account for this multi-level nature of your data?
Highly esteemed opponent, thank you very much for your question, and I'm glad you noticed the hair color matching to the slides in the book. That was very purposefully done to round up my time at UM, as I started it very nicely in pink. To answer your question, though, I think there's quite a difference in how different types of analysis are performed. Of course, if you do traditional statistical methods using ANOVAs or multi-nested models, you want to nest your data in teams. When I prepared the feature set data set that was used for the supervised machine learning tasks that I performed here, I did include teams as a feature originally. However, the results did not change by including this feature, and I removed it for model simplicity in the end. There is also no dependent variable in these chapters that is analyzed on a team level. I purely focus on, can I detect activity as indicated by the individual based on their individual feature. So the DV, team activity, and the individual features are both on the individual level in this sense. Because the performance is measured on a team level, we did swap to multi-level analysis for the performance analysis, because we were unable to create an individual measure from the dependent variable performance, and we were unable to provide input data that was on a team level for the features, as the features are measured on an individual level. While some of these features obviously are influenced by other team members, which is what we account for in the multi-level modeling, for supervised machine learning, this is traditionally done this way in the analysis with the individual features and the individual classification outcome variable. I hope this answers your question.
Yes, to some extent, maybe as a small follow-up, because even if it's at the individual level, of course, it's not independent of what's going on in the team, right? And that may be then still a concern that's not really addressed in this analysis strategy, I would argue.
Machine learning, you do not assume independence of variables. It's not an assumption required in the analysis. However, of course, in ANOVAs and traditional marketing statistics, independent of variables is an assumption, which is why we were unable to analyze the data in another method. Das ist,
Yeah, let's maybe leave it here because we could continue with
Sure.
the analysis strategy fitting to the data, but for now I'm satisfied.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you. The opposition will be continued by Professor Dr. Mohamed Zaki, who is the Deputy Director of Cambridge Service Alliance at the University of Cambridge. The floor goes to Professor Zaki.
Thank you so much. First of all, Steffi, this is really a great thesis. It was a really nice read to me. There's a lot of insights, so congratulations on this and the team as well here. However, I have two questions here. One is why we need machine learning model in the first two studies, and you did in the third study the regression analysis. The prediction part, my question is why we need that prediction in essence. So that's the first question. Second, I guess coming to the recommendations and the business application of your thesis. If I have a team dynamics or a group of employees in my company, they have different personality, they have different culture, they have different emotions, I guess, specifically when it comes to this enthusiastic about new ideas and etc. How we can control this based on some of the insights of your research? So how can I transfer this knowledge to a company when they have these dynamics in some of these kind of design thinking, prototyping, identifications and all that sort of things? That's my two questions. Thank you so much.
Dear highly esteemed opponent, thank you very much for your question. I'll try to answer it as good as I can. The first question was that you asked, why do we need the prediction modeling in the first place if we can do regression analysis? When I started this research, I did not find literature on actually separating these cognitive activities, as I call them here, but also just generally separating between different activities of teams in general. A lot of the, especially computer science literature, has teams just solve tasks, and then they check which features work and which do not. To put it very, very, very simply now. There's a very well-known seminal study on cognitive intelligence where teams perform, I think, over 100 tasks, and they range from ideation to prototyping to absolutely everything. They find turn-taking and psychological safety are the only variables that influence team performance. When I read this study and I looked at my own experience working with teams, I felt like the study was losing insights by doing this generalization across all tasks. It's great that we know that turn-taking and psychological safety are important across all tasks, but I do think if they had looked more into details into grouping these tasks that they gave participants based on the cognitive activities ongoing in the team, they could have had more results. And that was sort of a starting point that I started with. So to me, and of course also to my promoter, we felt like we had to prove first that it's possible to detect these activities and that there are differences. Because if there are no differences, why would you want to differentiate between the activities in the first place if the signals are the same, right? So now that we were able to establish this in study 1 and 2, with 1 being really just the proof of concept, single class, can we say yes, no to need finding and be accurate? And then of course later on also in the multi-class analysis, are we even able to pick between the three? Because of course with single class analysis you might end up with multi-classifications, right? The algorithm might say yes to need finding and yes to ideation. We were even still able to analyze this. It worked obviously better for prototyping and ideation as a differentiation because they contain opposing cognitive activities. Need finding is sort of the odd one out containing 2 cognitive activities. But I think it is important to prove that we can do this first to establish that there is a difference before we then build different recommendations for them for social signals. Because if there was no difference, there would be no point. That's why I started with the prediction modeling and then later looked into the performance evaluation to see if different signals then also influence the performance differently. For that study, I think also we really need to look into other features and see if there are features that have stronger impact on performance that are distinct between the studies, and potentially also investigate with this less noise in the data. quite frankly, the data I worked with was of a team working throughout the entire day. There was a lot of noise in the data, and I'm very happy that we were still able to generate these results. I think if you have more lab experimental quality data that's very neatly separates on activity, such as I did in the last study, you will be able to get better predictions. The other question you had was, how should I control other aspects, such as gender, such as culture, such as emotions? When I did my research, one big thing in my mind was, how can we do this with real teams? I really wanted to collect data in an actual company, with actual people working, not just have this super clean-cut student-designed studies. If you go to a company and you tell them that you will put a microphone on every employee, and that you will measure their emotions, and that you will give them 1 million questionnaires, and that you also would like to have their gender recorded, and I think if I'd gone to our GDPR officer, they would have had a nightmare. The company would have had a nightmare, and I would have never been able to do this. The other aspect is that you want this to be scalable. I think we need large-scale solutions, not something that I can apply to a small team of 4 people working in a room and that I can custom cut to their needs. And taking both of these aspects in mind, I wanted to generate research that can provide an approach that can be used in a data privacy sensitive context. I do not collect context of the conversation at all. The badges delete all recordings immediately off them. I only have the features. And further, in the online solution, there's also no recording of the actual spoken word. I have no gender of the participants. I have no discernible GDPR violating variables, and we were still able to do this. And that was really a goal of mine, to try to find solutions that are scalable. And they can only be scalable if we do not infringe in data rights. I hope this answers your question.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. The opposition will be continued by Professor Dr. Rudolf Müller, who is Professor of Quantitative Infonomics at this university. The floor goes to Professor Müller.
Dear candidate, dear Steffi, congratulations with a very nice thesis. When I got it and read in it, I was happy that to see that you're working now at Hochschule and that you collaborated with Kai Schröder on 2 of the papers, I think, or 3 even. And so nice to see that I see this also a little bit as a result of the collaboration between Hochschule and Maastricht University and Open University and the BIS Institute. So there are some things popping up now, coming out of that. Very nice thesis. I have a question. When I was reading about tools to support teams, I was immediately triggered by what's going on with ChatGPT these days. So I recently saw a paper by a former PhD student, Vera Blažević, who used ChatGPT or these kind of tools, generative AI, in service design tasks. Now, and then I thought, well, I needed a little bit of data, so I did a small experiment this morning. So I asked ChatGPT, could you provide me with a list of at least 10 unusual uses of a brick? And ChatGPT said, certainly, here are 10 unusual uses of a brick. I'm not going to read them all. Just 3 that I liked: a homemade smoker, stack bricks to create a simple smoker for slow cooking meats or vegetables. A boot and shoe cleaner, use a brick to scrape off mud and dirt from the soles of your shoes. And something that you might like, creative art canvas, stack bricks and paint them as a canvas for outdoor art or murals. Now, my question is not to rate the creativity or the originality of those answers. I have a more of a fundamental question. I think there is support, some evidence that these kind of tools are going to be used quickly as an assistant in tasks that you studied in your research. Now, you could argue that this computer, this ChatGPT or this AI tool is certainly not very emotional. Right? Well, you give it the word when you want to, and so on. But so all these emotional dimensions are somehow gone with incorporating it. So what, at the same time, we might get a productivity that is amazing, right? So, I mean, I could have asked for 20 and I would have gotten 20, however, or they are. So how do you see based on your experience with kind of different tools and also from your experience of the role of emotions in team formation, how do you see the future of embedding these communicative AI, generative AI in team performance, in teamwork? Looking forward to your answer.
Dear highly esteemed opponent, thank you very much for your question. ChatGPT does have quite some creative ideas sometimes. I like to use it as well, sort of as a bouncing board of ideas. A lot of them are not quite good at this point. The question, of course, is how good will they become in the future? Probably very good, I would assume. I do think that we will not, it will be unavoidable. Teams will use this. I think there's a lot of push forwards using generative AI. Microsoft will release a Copilot, or I think they have released it now. I'm actually not 100% sure. Sean might be able to tell us. But you can use Microsoft Copilot to finish writing your emails in Outlook, right? It will look through all of your emails and it will propose a text how you can answer it. And I think you will also be able to get a summary of the 1 million emails that are below that nobody remembers what was said in them. I think we will need to use these tools in the future. It will increase productivity. It will make very mundane tasks that took you very long, very fast. Will this replace creativity in teams? Certainly on the base level that I did in this analysis, yes. If you want this, like just getting some input on how to use a brick, obviously, I think it can do this. But when it comes to real-world problems of real teams working with design thinking, and often, for example, also if you look at design thinking teams collaborating with customers to do design ideations, I don't think it will be able to replace it. I did use a very simplistic measure here for performance. I gave myself a little bit of slack of using a control setting, students, and a straightforward evaluation task. I would like to see this tool also used in a more complex context, where creativity evaluations are not just countable, simply, having an evaluation done, counting how the evaluators rated it, and then counting it down and giving it a performance score. I do like to believe that this is a skill, communication, that you can learn to be more creative, while at the same time using generative AI to generate ideas or assist teams in other means and methods. But I do think the human element will not be replaced anytime soon when it comes to complex problem solving and novel idea generation.
Yeah, but still, if maybe a more philosophical follow up on that. I mean, if you might think if ChatGPT can do this brick task so creatively, or it seems creatively, so what is the role of the emotions if you have a human team? Is it really to be creative, to create something new at that moment, or is it like helping us to memorize the things that popped up in our minds in the past and that should now come to the foreground and lift that to the foreground? And ChatGPT doesn't need that.
I think it's important to keep in mind that true AI, as we like to see it in movies, that will take over the world and dominate us all, does not exist at this point. ChatGPT is simply a statistical model that's not, it's on a very large scale, but it's not that much more evolved than a simple regression. A true AI, as we would like to all think, that ChatGPT sits there and thinks about our question really hard and comes up with a creative idea, is not what it actually does. It goes through its database and it does a statistical analysis to understand what is the most likely word to come after the word it said beforehand in order to answer the input question that you gave it, to break it down in a bit of a simple level. Unless we find a way to actually have true AI, I think nothing that generative AI can do will match the human brain when it comes up with novel idea and combining insights and knowledge together. So I do think that a team really has the emotion of coming up with something creative. They draw from experience. They draw from their knowledge on, if you talk at product generation specifically, they draw from past knowledge they have their product. They draw from inspiration they have, from conversations we have. Pentland did this also very seminal study about the water cooler talk, right? Our interactions with other humans and how we are able to combine insights into novel ideas is unmatched at this point. And I do not believe it will be matched in the near future by AI.
Thank you very much. I hope you're right.
Thank you. The opposition will be continued by Dr. Jonas Heller, who is a member of the Marketing and Supply Chain Management team at this university. The floor goes to Dr. Heller.
Dear Steffi, dear candidate, thank you very much for your wonderful dissertation. I really enjoyed reading Making the Invisible Visible. I think the title really captures what you did, mainly visualizing human interaction and analyze these interactions as well. Being the last in the opposition for today, I focus on the very end of your thesis as well, namely chapter 5. And you mentioned chapter 5 was the chapter that was a little bit enforced on you through the pandemic. And it's a chapter that deals with the online interactions. And on page 82, and I quote here, you write, while past researchers used area encoding and utilized orbs for speech representation, more recent research indicates that the most efficient visual encoding for the given task is centered triangles. And you cite a paper that you co-authored as well with Kai Schröder. And my question is, because I had a look at this paper as well, it looks like it uses a similar sample that you also use in chapter 5. So my first question is, why is it not included in your chapter 5? The second question is, when coming up with these centered triangles, you measure relevant measures like the thumb model, for example. But if I'm not mistaken, you don't compare it to other existing tools. You state that your tool, the centered triangles, are well accepted and that they're visually appealing and so on, and that they're not boring. But my second question is, how can you state that your newly developed VCon tool is actually better than others? And last but not least, third question would be, how would the centered triangles actually work if you have a participant number in an online call that is different than 4? Because in your studies, you always used 4 participants that interact with each other.
Dear esteemed opponent, thank you very much for your question. I'm glad you read the other paper. It was a shame I couldn't include it in the thesis. I think it does really help understand how this tool was developed. What we did for the development of the tool, and for those who have not read the paper, we did a heat map evaluation of participants, which was a different data set. So the participants that participated in the heat map study did not participate in the performance study. Which is why this is not included. There was also no performance measure performed in the visualization development. We primarily focused on qualitative feedback groups as well as heat mapping of the eye movement of the participants when using the tool. So on the one hand, I interviewed groups using the tool on how they perceived the usage of the tool and how they remember, if they remembered it, if they saw it, if it distracted them from performing or from answering the question, but then also how they experience the group dynamic from using it. And further, we looked into where do people actually look. What you don't want is a tool where participants stare at the visualization the entire conversation. It makes conversations very unnatural. That was also reflected in the qualitative feedback I collected. And you do not want participants to never look at it, because then they haven't seen it, and they also don't remember it. We compared 4 different visualizations, and these visualizations were based on what's available in the literature, what has been used in the past. And at the time that we conducted this study, I'm not entirely sure if there are more updated versions now since 2022, but we used a bar chart, which has been used in offline studies and used to be shown on the wall when the team was talking. There is also the breakout tool by MIT Media Lab, where they use the circles and the movements on mobile phones in offline groups. And both of these performed very poorly in our evaluation. The bar charts people didn't understand and couldn't compare. And the circuits, people completely forgot that they had a different discussion and they just kept staring at these moving and growing circles. It was extremely distracting for the participants. So we excluded these two immediately. We had squares that grow and shrink, and we had triangles that grow and shrink also. And the participants said that the square really took a lot of space from the screen. The evaluation otherwise was very similar. Also, the heat mapping was very similar between the triangle and the square visualization. And we went with the triangle visualization as it seemed to us to be very similar, but less invasive in terms of obscuring the screen of people talking and being less.
You may briefly conclude
Sure.
your answer.
Which is why we chose this triangle visualization. I think it would be good to compare performance in the future. For the context of this thesis, it was not possible to me.
Thank you. Steffi Kohl, the time appointed for defending your thesis has passed, and the degree committee will now withdraw to discuss the quality of your thesis and the quality of your defense. And I request that you and your company await the results of our deliberations and our return in this room.
Please all rise.
The PhD defense has now ended. The degree committee will debate the candidate's performance behind closed doors. This process usually takes about 10 minutes.
Long road to the south side, 10 miles in my rearview mirror. I know what it felt like. My goal's only getting clearer. East side to the west side. No place like home. If it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and die. I know what's on the line. I know you know that I can't read your mind. Years can't fly by now, don't waste all your time. Cause I'll go the extra mile. Long road to the south side, 10 miles in my rearview mirror. I know what it felt like. My goal's only getting clearer. East side to the west side. No place like home. If it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and die. On the dash, got my laces tied. Long road, I don't waste no time. Break rules because fate decides. With the team and we chase the light. I make a move, fall down, shake it off. I hate to lose, bad branch, break it off. No room for negativity, praise and love. Prepare for deep part cause we're taking off. Get the mileage, traveling so far from home. Gathering knowledge, other connections. I put the time in to get everything I ever hoped for. It's a challenge and we all in. It's a better future than we go for. And even though these nights seem long, I know that I am never on my own. Know you've won the battle once you've grown. Long road to the south side, 10 miles in my rearview mirror. I know what it felt like. My goal's only getting clearer. East side to the west side. No place like home. If it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and die. Long road to the south side, 10 miles in my rearview mirror. I know what it felt like. My goal's only getting clearer. East side to the west side. No place like home. If it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and die. I I know you know that I can't read your mind. Years can't fly by now, don't waste all your time. 'Cause I'll go the extra mile.
Steffi Kohl. The degree committee here present has assessed the quality of your thesis and the quality of your defense. And in view of its positive verdict and taking into account your previous qualifications, the degree committee has decided to grant you the degree of doctor. Professor Lemming is authorized to confer upon you this academic distinction in accordance with Dutch university custom, and I invite your supervisor to now take the floor.
So now it's time for the formalities. Steffi, do you promise to work in accordance with the principles of scientific integrity at all times? To be careful and honest, transparent, independent and responsible?
I promise.
And then, by the authority vested in us by law and in conformity with the decision of the committee here present, I hereby confer upon you, Steffi Kohl, the degree of doctor and grant you all rights attached by custom and law. As evidence of this, I now present you with a degree certificate signed by the rector, the secretary and the other members of the committee and affixed with the official seal of the university.
Professor Lemming will also do the laudatio.
Yes, and I also will do this on behalf of the co-promoter Mark Graus, who could not be here present today. It started pink in 2017, and it ends with pink, right? In 2023, with a very nice dissertation also in pink. So here you are, 24th of October, 2023. Congratulations with your doctorate, Steffi. Well deserved. Before I say a few words about the trajectory that led to this special day, I would like to welcome and congratulate your family. Vishal, congratulations with Steffi's achievement. She did really well, and I will come back to that in a minute. Sehr geehrte Mutter, ja, und Bruder, ja, hier anwesend und dein Vater. Es freut mich sehr, dass dein Vater online anwesend ist. Ich weiß, wie viel das für dich bedeutet. Ein spezieller Gruß an deinen Vater. Soll sehr stolz sein auf seine Tochter. Herr Kohl, ich gratuliere Sie von Herzen. I already announced that you did really well, and I talked to Mark Graus as well about how we experienced your supervision trajectory. And there were some hiccups, and I will also mention them. We concluded there are a couple of keywords that would describe you. And what do you like? So how are you? And there are some keywords. Problem-based learning, automated team communication, so we heard a lot about this today. Supervision struggle, so we will learn that in a minute. Splendid isolation, representing PhDs, the career path, and online, offline. And don't worry, it's only 5 minutes, so I got the instruction of the chair, Professor Foppen, to be brief in this case. Steffi, as a problem-based learning advocate, you deliberately chose Maastricht when you were choosing for a university study, first University College, later SBE International Business. At different occasions and in teaching, you was volunteering to spread the good news of problem-based learning. And so we all in Maastricht feature problem-based learning, and this is the way we teach, and this is the way students learn. You were a highly motivated tutor that inspired teaching, faculty, and students. Mark Graus, your co-promoter, remembered meeting you as a newly appointed assistant professor and tutor for the Marketing Research Methods course, where you already showed your immense proactiveness and commitment by explaining to Mark, actually, how courses are taught and pushing him to take the necessary steps to make the course happen and organize properly. So you were helping a lot, because he was new. He was new in the faculty. He was freshly appointed. What was impressive in his eyes was how little pretense there were in this from your side. At no moment did you make him feel like you were teaching him how to teach, while in fact that was exactly what was happening. He never taught in the problem-based learning system, so he experienced that he learned a lot. So this really describes your teaching passion, and that you help your supervisor to do the job of teaching. So then the topic of your dissertation, automated support systems, measurements by human sensors. Of course, this is something that we have experience with, and personally I'm also very interested in for years now. And you were collecting human data, and this was also quite unique at our school, to use these novel ways to collect by human sensors, human data. So you were choosing a topic in between domains, and you had to figure out how to do research and how to combine research from business research and computer science. And indeed, in your context, disciplines like psychology, organization, marketing, and computer science were reviewed and applied. For that, not only you have had to get familiar with the different sets of methods and different literature streams, but in addition to that, you had developed technical skills like programming in Python, dealing with physical sensor devices. So also Mark came to the conclusion that there probably are a few PhD students that would succeed under these circumstances of multidisciplinarity. Later on, COVID hit us on top of that, and literally you had to change the experiments into an online experiment, and we were already discussing that. That experiment was very time-consuming to build up in COVID times, but by the end it worked out well, and it is witnessed. You witnessed that in chapter 5. Then the supervision struggle. So I was also part of that. As I was not an expert in computer science, we decided to involve co-promoters with an eye for that discipline. So first we asked Ben Lucas, and he was helping out first. Then we asked Mark Graus, because Ben moved to University of Nottingham, and it was very difficult to keep the level of guidance at the same pace. Then we asked Mark Graus, a data scientist. We talked about that a bit. So he was helping out. He is the data scientist and co-promoter that is featuring on this dissertation project. And later on, Professor Kai Schröder of the Human Data Interaction Lab. He moved now to another position, but at that time he was the leading person in Human Data Interaction Lab. And this was in the early days of the BIS campus, and this was also truly a token of collaboration with other institutions like the Open University, Zuid University of Applied Sciences, and Maastricht University. Pioneering days, and you were able to find your way. So in the early stages, you experienced some serious challenges with supervision as well, with not one, but two supervisors leaving the jobs. So Ben Lucas left to Nottingham, and I fell ill for 9 months, so I was not there in this period of time. This was a tough period, and Mark is convinced that it's only due to your character and perseverance that you succeeded in your PhD project. So splendid isolation, that's another keyword that applies to you. Some researchers flourish when they work in splendid isolation. I know researchers, colleagues that do that actually. And if you isolate them, they come to perfect results. But not you. It is I would like to mention that you always sought collaboration, looking for collaboration. You always surrounded yourself with a diverse group of researchers. And yeah, so that is really to be applauded, that you did that. And it was not only that you constantly were able to tap the brains of other researchers, and they tapped your brains, of course, but also this was done across disciplines. So doing that, really doing that, that's a challenge. Then you were representing PhDs. You had a sort of a natural antenna for social and organizational affairs around fellow researchers. So in other words, you were representing PhD students of the department first, then on behalf of SBE, and you worked with PhD representatives of other faculties as well as the rector. So your career path now is after this achievement. You started working for the Human Data Interaction Lab, Zuid University of Applied Sciences, and you're also a researcher for the ELSA Lab for Poverty and Debt. So this once more shows your very broad interest, but also your very broad collaboration with industry and academia. Online and offline, so that's the final theme. That's also the topic of your chapter 5. Also today we had online and offline. Thanks a lot for the opposition here present offline in the aula. And also thanks a lot for the opposition that is present online. So it was a very nice mixture from all parts of the world. We got input and we had discussions. You did a great job. And once more, I would like to congratulate you. I'm really proud of your achievement as well. And I wish you all the best for the future. And I will give back to the pro-rector.
Dear Dr. Kohl, also on behalf of Maastricht University, I congratulate you, your family, your friends, your supervisors with the degree you have acquired. And I would like to thank the members of the degree committee for their interesting contribution. For the information of those attending, the reception, the opportunity to congratulate Steffi will be in Kepasa. That's the cafe that you see if you walk out of the building. If you close your eyes, you'll run into Kepasa anyway. We will take some pictures here just to formalize things. And we are now give the members of the online opposition a second to congratulate you because now they are still present online. And then we will have the picture being taken on the stairs. These are all formalities which is interesting for the archive of the university, but of course also contribute to your performance. So let's, I'll close the session, but I close the session for all of you to go to Kepasa if you want to, but we are going to take some pictures here and on the stairs. Okay.
Recording stopped.
Thank you very much. You did a great job.